You are listening to Know You're Crazy. My name is Susan Denee. We all have crazy. What separates us is how we choose to deal with it. I'm going to be delivering engaging and actionable tools to own your crazy, treat your crazy, and turn it into your own superpower. I hope that you walk away from this show feeling the power and strength within you. And never forget to enjoy your journey because you are worth it. Hey everyone, welcome to the Know You're Crazy talk show. My name is Susan Denee, and you are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. Today's topic is grumpiness. Yes, grumpiness. I bet you've never been guilty of grumpiness, huh? Actually, I'm going to give a few ways in which you can help minimize your grumpiness. And by minimize, I mean shorten the time span for how long you're grumpy. So if you ever wonder where the creepy, crawly grumpiness comes from, have you ever wondered about that? Because once it's got its crawl on, it's really kind of difficult to suspend the momentum. And have you learned to identify your grumpy? Have you investigated your crazy grumpy yet? How does it feel? And what do you do about it? For today's show, this is the exact stuff I'm going to be talking about. I was inspired recently because of my own behavior around grumpiness, and it got me curious. So I thought, we'll do a show on grumpiness. First of all, did you know that grumpiness, the definition, it's a feeling and or quality of often being slightly annoyed or likely to complain a lot? So who are my complainers out there? Are you complaining? Are other people not doing what you want them to do? Are things consistently not going your way? Do you find yourself, quote unquote, venting to your friends all the time? You might be suffering from undiagnosed grumpiness. The descriptive words for being grumpy are ill-tempered, sullenly irritable, disagreeable. I just dumbed it all down. I just said, don't be a dick. It's dickish behavior. It's when we just want to be cranky and we want to take hostages around us. We don't care what our behavior is around other people. That's the grumpy, crazy, out of the box stuff. Grumpiness, it's not an emotion. It's actually a mood. And here's a long descriptive way to explain mood, and then I'm going to simplify it because I like simple. But, sometimes different organizations like to have a very long descriptive explanation. For the clinical folks out there, they probably just chew this stuff up, no problem comprehending it. For folks like me, I I like a common sense version. But according to the National Library of Medicine, the concept of mood in psychology is considered as a group of persisting feelings associated with evaluative and cognitive states which influence all the future evaluations, feelings, and actions. Or to dumb it down for someone like me, a mood is a prolonged emotional state that can last from minutes to hours to days. My question for you watching and or listening today is, how long or how many of you have been stuck in prolonged states of grumpiness? Right? How many of you? There's underlying symptoms, causes of grumpiness. My recent story around grumpiness and how I came to the term De-Grumpify, I laugh because I say my husband's got copyrights and trademark on De-Grumpify. It was a couple weeks ago. I had taken a phone call. Okay, life is lifey. We go through different life stuff. Sometimes it feels like there's just too much at one time. Does that ever happen to you? Like this is going on. Maybe you're a fantastic compartmentalizer. I would like to consider myself someone who compartmentalizes like an expert almost to a fault. stick this one thing in this box, emotional box, stick this one in another box. And, oh, that's going to impact me here, but I'm just going to put it over here. I'm going to do the task in front of me. Well, I had one of those days. And it was anywhere from taking a call about my elderly mom needing to be in a nursing home, which was a move from one place to another, 1,500 miles away from me, to family, kids stuff going on underneath the roof, to business stuff going on the side, and all day long, just kind of pivoting and shifting and addressing the next thing in front of me, and thinking I'm doing okay. Thinking I'm doing okay. Like, yep, took that phone call. That was a little challenging to hear. Yep, okay, checklist needs to happen. X, Y, and Z is probably going to occur. Okay, I'm not going to process that right now because I got other things in front of me, so I'm just going to table it. Well, after tabling all day, tabling this, tabling that, shoving it in a box, moving forward, getting through the stuff, and I'm talking about emotional stuff. I'm talking about, how we consciously and cognitively process situations as they come at us. How good am I at that today? Well, I'm a heck of a lot better at it than I was, 10 years ago, heck, 5 years ago. When we consistently take responsibility for our emotions and our behaviors and the outcomes of those, and when we celebrate positive emotions and positive thinking, we change, we grow. So it's the end of the day, it's about 6 o'clock. I've been cognitively processing and pushing in each corner. And I walk in the living room, and the living room is kind of attached to the kitchen, like an open concept. And my husband's in there doing what he's doing. And I just find myself, I don't even know if he said something or he moved something. Like, I don't even know if that's what triggered it, but I felt irritated. Like, I just felt irritated. And I knew that nobody had done anything to me. Like, intellectually, consciously, I could tell myself nothing's going on, but I felt the rush of frustration. And I paused, I identified it, and I'll talk more about that further on in the show. And I just said to him, I'm going to step away, because when my crazy goes off the charts and I can start to feel it fueling, it's kind of revving the engine a little bit, like, oh my goodness, take cover. I'm going to separate myself from the family. I'm not going to take hostages. Don't want to hurt anybody. The psychological damage going on. So I'm going to go do my thing. I'm going to go get quiet. I might go do some breathing exercises, but I'm going to separate myself. I allow myself to have permission to separate myself. So I walk away. And as I walk away, he says to me, oh, you going to go de-grumpify? I started laughing. I thought, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go de-grumpify. The feelings of frustration and what overcome us in the spot can sometimes take us off guard. Like, we're not expecting it to happen, especially when we're, kind of shoving and putting stuff in its own category, and we're taking care of business. We're not always expecting the grumpiness to come on. But you know the feeling, don't you? I mean, you think about it. Just think about it. What is the difference between grumpiness and anger? Anger for me is way more fueled with some righteous passion, some righteousness, some justification. Usually, it might take me a little bit longer. Grumpiness is like that. Well, I said it earlier. It's like that little ill-tempered frustration. But the key with grumpiness is, let's kind of put a cap on it in the early stages, so that we don't get to the later stage of full-blown anger when we start accusing others of being responsible for how we feel. And we do it in an outlandish, abusive, maybe out loud way. We start throwing temper tantrums because, when it was at the baby feeling of frustration, we didn't learn to shift or take responsibility for the grumpiness. And lo and behold, we end up, how grumpiness is. You start maybe slamming door, cupboard, you shut it a little bit harder. Somebody makes a comment, you might make a murmur under your breath, or you're just irritated. You're just irritated. And so today I wanted to do a show on how do we de-grumpify, and how do we really take responsibility for being grumpy, and what does that look like? And I found it quite interesting. Did you know, I didn't know this until I started doing research for this show, that psychology doesn't necessarily recognize grumpiness. It'll recognize other emotions, It'll recognize, the anger, sadness, even depression, like all of that. But grumpiness, there's no research on grumpiness. Like I was going through all kinds of, psychology, online search engines, doing everything I could do to find some research on grumpiness. And there really wasn't that much. I found a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, however, that did have some information on grumpiness, which I totally appreciated. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit of my own experience just in coaching others, real life stuff. You already heard my first story, what it's like to be in relationship with others when they are grumpy. What is a good tool for us to do? Are we able to not wear their emotional jacket of grumpiness? I'll talk a little bit about that. And so there's two different roles. Who are you when somebody else is grumpy? And who are you when you're the grumpy one, right? And so as I continue in the show and I start, going through these different things about what are the common causes of grumpiness, how quickly to reverse grumpiness, in its infancy. There's two different types of action involved. We have our thought action, and then we have tangible physical action we can take to help reduce that. And what are some other spiritual practices we can do in order to de-grumpify? Can we bring in some higher level thinking in order to help our grumpiness? And so when I return from break, I'm going to start in with the different causes of grumpiness, what might be going on, and some different ways to look at grumpiness with you and with the loved ones in your life, or maybe not so loved ones. Maybe the coworker sitting over there in the cubicle who's driving you crazy. I don't know. What's our performance like at work when we come in grumpy? Think about it. You come in emotional hangover, you're grumpy, coffee spilled on you in your commute, you're irritated, maybe the alarm didn't go off, maybe you forgot to put on your makeup. I don't know, but you're all irritable because things aren't going your way. You're grumpy. How many of you check out at work when you're grumpy? Like you come in with that emotional grumpiness right off the bat and you're wondering, I just don't feel like working today. I'm just going to be grumpy. All right, so if you're interested in some of that stuff, return with me when I come back from break, and I'm going to get into the causes of grumpiness when I return. Be back. Welcome back to the Know You're Crazy talk show. My name is Susan Denee, and you are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. Today's topic is grumpiness. Yes, grumpiness. Where does grumpiness come from? How can we spot it in the infancy stages before it goes to full-blown anger? Grumpiness has been defined as a mood, a negative mood. Got some background noise. Okay, as a negative mood that can last for quite a while. It can go from minutes to days to, hopefully not years, but it can be it's like chronic state of a mood. So anyway, what are the common causes of grumpiness? The one I was sharing about before I went on break was being overwhelmed with the inability to control circumstances, And so that was my experience a couple of weeks ago. As life was doing life on life's terms and different things were coming up in one day, by the end of the day, I was feeling overwhelmed. And as the overwhelming, kind of settled in and the day started progressing, I started getting a little bit of fatigue. I started to realize, there was an inability to control the circumstances. And with that, there's an inability to control other behaviors. What's going on around us? How is somebody not behaving in a way in which we wish they would? How can they not realize they're doing that? Or are they aware of how their mood or how their actions are impacting us? Before I went to break, I was talking about how do we deal with grumpiness in others? How do we not wear their grumpy emotional jacket, right? How can we identify grumpiness for what it is and not make it trauma? I was speaking with a client recently and we were talking about, they had described a situation that had some pretty difficult communication with an ex, right? And there were some words that they used to describe it. And my suggestion was to really identify the words in which you're using when you're describing your problems. Nowadays, with all the things that we have access to online, and we could all probably self-diagnose ourselves and think that we're doing really good at it. And we can call different things, I think I've hit on this a few times in the show. I could probably say trauma might be overused today. Some people may disagree with me, but some people can overuse the word abuse. Was that abuse, or was it just blunt, obnoxious behavior? I don't know. It's really hard sometimes to identify what's going on in another person, but we just kind of just be careful about that. Like if you hear yourself using what I like to call quote unquote repeater words to describe a particular feeling that you have, or somebody's actions on you, if you're saying that somebody else's actions on you, let's say they're just grumpy, but what you're perceiving is something different. And maybe you've got a history with being around somebody that's super angry, but you're calling it abuse. If you're hearing yourself use those words over and over, I would highly suggest you get into some therapy and start working that out. Or is it just a habit of description, and you might want to look up some new words to help identify the emotions and feelings that you're having? And I'm not trying to dismiss or minimize people's feelings or emotions by any means at all. Just saying, sometimes we got to take a look at that. It's easy to catch on to vocabulary or use descriptive words based on what we are influenced by today online. So much access to us out there, and somebody else's situation may feel like we identify with it. And sometimes we can get a little bit too dramatic about it. I was visiting I'm actually in Nebraska right now, visiting my elderly mother, and I can't remember what we were talking about. She's early stages, dementia, Alzheimer's, I don't know. But she still has one heck of a sense of humor. But I made her laugh when I said, "Don't be a drama queen." And, she started chuckling. And, because sometimes we exaggerate a little bit. But the grumpiness can start out as overwhelmed, right? Grumpiness can start out as, I can't control everybody else's behaviors around me. I think about, how does grumpiness show up with a bulldozer? A bulldozer is probably, and that's the category I would be in. If you haven't been watching the show very long, bulldozer and doormat are my two descriptions for different personality types. And we have a little bit of each of those in us. Bulldozer's more outward, blunt. I'd say more prone to outward expression, aggressiveness. Doormat's inward. Bulldozer, you're the problem. I'm going to tell you the problem. I don't care about, hard time taking accountability sometimes for some things. It's always outward blame, where the doormat is going to be inward blame. What did I do to cause this? It's like the ego manifestation to an extreme. And most of us have a core response or core way we emotionally respond to things. And like I said, there's a little bit of each in each of us. I was a bulldozer at work for many years, but I was a doormat in my marriage. I didn't know how to express, communicate, talk about how things made me feel. I would avoid the conversation. I would think that I had to fix me, and I had no business asking them to make a change. And so there was this doormat feeling, as if I didn't have a right to say those things. And so it can show up in different ways. When it comes to grumpiness, though, and you get a grumpy bulldozer, we're the ones that are probably going to slam a door. Now, doormat with a bulldozer edge might passive aggressively slam doors, maybe, I guess, but bulldozers are probably going to be a little bit more outward with their grumpiness. This is why when I was giving my story about my experience with grumpiness recently, that I said, I told my husband, I'm going to walk away, because I know my crazy. I know my grumpy crazy. Like, I get it. I know exactly, I could do some collateral damage maybe, and then, really have an impact on a crappy evening for the family, or I can step away and take care of that crazy, right? So the doormat, on the other hand, the grumpiness might be more inward. I think sometimes with a doormat, majority it has a difficult time, one, admitting they're grumpy, or acknowledging that it's okay to be grumpy. It's like it's a different mindset, almost different emotional mindset, I guess I would say. So what does that, inward dynamic for doormat grumpiness might be, and well, this might be bulldozer too, imaginary conversations, right? Imaginary argumentative conversations. Something's not going your way. You're getting frustrated. You start slamming doors, throwing stuff down. Maybe you toss the cell phone down a little bit harder than usual. Those are different symptoms of grumpiness. Those are different things you may want to look out for. In the research that I was doing for the show when it came to grumpiness, as I said, psychology doesn't really have a category for grumpiness of research. Like it was really difficult, but I did come across a clinical psychologist by the name of Nick Wignall. And what he talked about were some different underlying causes of grumpiness. It was really quite a great article he wrote on it. But one of the things that can cause grumpiness is unmet psychological needs. And he said one of the things that he comes across in his clients and in his experience is that a lot of people lack the assertive communication, lacking assertive communication. In his belief, we've done a poor job, or in his understanding, I don't know if it's belief, because it was an article, I'm assuming that we've kind of done a disservice to the word assertive, as if we're afraid to be assertive. And how I understood that is what I'm talking about with having expression. How can you meet my needs? How can you meet my psychological needs if I'm not expressing to you that I need them met? How can somebody meet your psychological relationship needs if you're not telling them what you need, or if you haven't done the work to identify what those needs are? If you can't use descriptive words to describe how you're feeling. And I don't think we talk about this enough. A lot of us are going through the motions, and perhaps, and it's going to go into the next cause of grumpiness. We go through these motions of being in relationships with people, whether it's intimate, family, friends, expecting them to read our minds, and then walking away, feeling let down, and nobody's doing it the way we want them to do. And we are consistently putting other people in a position that they're supposed to change or behave in a certain way so that we feel better. It's the ultimate emotional jacket scenario. So the second thing that he suggests would be an underlying cause of grumpiness is unrealistic expectations of circumstances and or people. Oh, the recovery world. Anybody who's 12-stepping, we know this one. High expectations. High expectations get so high, what happens? We start to feel disappointed. We have these high expectations that somebody else is going to behave in a certain way, and then they don't behave in that certain way. And now we're left feeling as if they've let us down. We're disappointed. I had to do some really good work with an ex-boss of mine. I couldn't understand why he just wouldn't listen. It didn't make sense to me. I felt like I'd go in the office, be talked in circles, and spit back out. I didn't get it. I was really disappointed. And every now and then it was like he'd dangle a carrot. It seemed like he was very, just like cool boss. And then other times there was just a lot of disappointment. So after I got into working around that with somebody, not only in recovery, but a psychologist, really what we dribbled that down to was, I had a fantastic father. I had a father who listened to me, who took his time with me, who would listen to me, whether it was brag, complain, whatever it was, he would take the time to listen to me. And so therefore, I had a belief and an understanding that maybe the male figure, because in this case, my boss was a male, would behave in a similar way as my father. And so I had this expectation, maybe of men at that point, but I got to do a lot of work around that. And understanding that my grumpiness when I would walk out of his office, or my irritation or my feeling of disappointment, was really coming from unmet high expectations. That person was not able to meet my expectations. Was it right? Was it wrong? Was it fair? Was it justified? I don't know. But only I can change how I perceive a situation in order to feel better in my life. And so when we get our expectations too high, we feel a little bit disappointed. And so then when we try to dismiss those expectations, we then feel righteous, like we should be able to have them, like, shouldn't I be able to expect my boss to behave in a certain way? Shouldn't I be able to expect that? And there might be some reasonable expectations that with other people's behaviors, but I won't go into that can of worms right now. So when I return from break, I'm going to go over the next underlying cause of grumpiness. And I'm going to add to that just based on my own experience with others and personally. And so I will be back here shortly after break. If you want to reach out, if you're looking for any type of coaching, feel free to check out my website at susandenee.com, or you can also message me on any of my social media. It'll be a pleasure to work with you. Be back shortly. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Know You're Crazy show. You are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. Today's topic is grumpiness, how to de-grumpify. For the first half of the show, I've simply been talking about identifying the grumpiness, what goes into it. And before I went to last break, I was wrapping up with what are the causes of grumpiness? Psychology doesn't really have a category of research on grumpiness. They do on a lot of emotions, but this one isn't really considered that. It's a mood. However, I come across some research by a psychologist, and so I'm going over some of the things that he said were underlying causes of grumpiness, and that he, in his research with clients, and that he found to be true for him, and it kind of aligned with my experience, and I've added a couple things to it. Before I went to break, I talked about a couple of those underlying causes of grumpiness. The first one was unmet psychological needs. When we have a lack of, we lack an ability for assertive communication. We're not expressing ourselves enough to the people around us. They don't know how to meet our needs because we're not telling them. We're not telling them. And so therefore, our emotional and psychological needs are not met. And as we assume that they should know what we're thinking, they really don't. Or the way we are communicating is not working. The words we're using are not settling. Perhaps you and your intimate partner are in a repeater loop. You're both communicating over and over and over, but you're using the same words with each other. The same comments are made. There's nothing new and refreshing coming into the communication, and you're wondering why you feel grumpy with each other. Why is he getting on my nerves? Why is she doing that? She's so irritating when she does that. But yet the relationship as a team has yet to try new things and actually implement them. So before I go on too much of a tangent on that, the next underlying cause of grumpiness would be unrealistic expectations of circumstances and or people. Take a personal inventory of your expectations. If you find that you get pretty irritated at work, take an inventory of who you're being irritated with. I shared a story before break about having some high expectations of an old boss, not understanding, why he just couldn't be what I needed him to be. And I thought I was appropriately expressing. And what it came down for me was inappropriate expectations. My expectations of his ability to do something a certain way were too high. He just wasn't capable of it. And I don't know if that was right or wrong for me, or if it was fair or justified. But at the end of the day, he was going to be who he was going to be, and I was going to be who I was going to be. And with my expectations, I brought a history of having a great conversation with my father. And in the male figure, he was a great listener, and he did a lot for me. And so I had like this underlying belief and expectation of this male role in my life that he too would be that way. I was left feeling a little grumpy. I was complaining. Remember some of the descriptive words in the very beginning of the show, a symptom or a sign of grumpiness. Ill-tempered, a complainer. Are you complaining about anybody in your life? And if you are complaining about somebody's behavior in your life, ask yourself, are my expectations reasonable about this person? If you complain about your kids, and let's just say let's just say early 20s and younger. If you find yourself complaining about your kids not doing it enough the way you think they should, are your expectations a little high? Maybe they're not capable of getting there. Maybe their journey, I used to tell somebody very close to me, you got to remember, they're 16, they're not 55. As we get older, we've lived a whole lifetime, but our children haven't lived that life yet. Their perceptions are still new and refreshing. They still have to have a few speed bumps along the way in order to effectuate any type of change in their life. And as parents, we can have too high of expectations on our children. We can place our own values and call it like we're quote unquote doing what's good for them, when really we're just self-centered parents wanting kids to do what we want them to do. When really, I believe they have to have their own journey. Are your expectations too high of your children? Are you meeting their psychological needs, or are you meeting your ego needs? I don't know. What's another cause of grumpiness? I'm kind of hitting it, aren't I? I always say, if you hang in there and you watch this show with me, I'm going to kind of angle in there a little bit, because I'm all about nobody can change enough for us to be happy. We are personally responsible for our decisions, for our actions, and for our change. It is not up to somebody to change their life for me to feel better, but I do get to have an opportunity to express what I need. And I do get to express boundaries, and I do get to express these things if I am aggressive about it, right? We have to have aggressiveness in a healthy way in our communication so people know how to meet these needs of ours. Here's the next one. And the psychologist that I was researching, I found my research from, he was saying that one of the underlying cause of grumpiness is negative self-talk. It's the overcritical of self. How many of you, when you, in your opinion, make a mistake, really get grumpy about it on yourself? Like the inward talk is negative. You miss an appointment that was planned. You spend money on something and it ends up being the wrong product, and you just beat yourself up over it all the time. I had to do some self-reflection myself today to really ask myself on a particular situation, can I live with my choices? Am I okay with my integrity in this area? And I had to do some work around that, because when we are criticizing ourselves for our own action, and I always like to say we're hanging ourselves on that cross, that can definitely cause a state of grumpiness. And anybody around us is going to feel that energetically from us. And the other one to really pay attention is when our self-negative talk has gone on for so long in any of those key 4 areas I talk about, finances, relationship, health, or career. But when that negative self-talk has gone on for so long that it no longer is even talk, it's just a feeling. The talk hasn't even hit your consciousness anymore. You're not tearing yourself down with imaginary talk anymore, or made up talk in your head. You're not having active, conscious, negative self-talk anymore. You've done it for so long that it's now ingrained in you, and you just feel it. You know what I'm talking about? That's the stuff. When we are constantly in a perpetual cycle of negativity, that causes grumpiness. I mean, I know for me professionally, that's been one I've had to come out of over the last 4 years, of having a perception or different beliefs about my abilities or no abilities or motivation or lack of motivation, but getting to the point where I had to consciously start pulling up, what am I thinking about this? Pull it up, and not even thinking anymore, because it's such it can be an ingrained negative belief that you have going on, that it's not even what am I consciously thinking, it's more as what am I feeling and what beliefs are behind that feeling. You know, sometimes you just feel grumpy or irritable, discontent. We say that in recovery, and we don't even know why. Well, because we've been burying the thinking for so long, it's now just ingrained in us. We don't even know why we feel grumpy anymore. We just are. There's some work to be done there. So if you're finding yourself on a regular time frame, just often you're grumpy, you're cranky pants. Oh, we can be so sensitive. I'm going to just do a little side trip here. So I'm a recovered alcoholic. My husband's a recovered alcoholic. And one of the jokes a lot of us make in recovery is how sensitive we can be and how personally we will take stuff. People won't be doing nothing to us, but boy, we will be sensitive. When my husband and I first started dating, we might have been in the first few years of our relationship. He'd call me grumpy pants. I would get so mad. It actually had to be like, he can't say it no more, because I was so personally offended by it. As if, you don't call me grumpy pants. I mean, it's funny now, but at the time it felt so real. You ever be so grumpy and somebody call you out on it and you just, yeah, that kind of stuff. So anyways, okay, I went off on a segue there. Remembered grumpy pants. It was a flashback, but it wasn't trauma. I want to just say that. That's not trauma, people. That's just thinking back and thinking, oh my goodness, that used to make me irritated. I just had to make a full circle there. I just did. I talked about being careful about the words we use and how we perceive things. And maybe it's in that same category about being overly sensitive to things. Not everything needs to be trauma, right? All right. Okay. So you got these underlying causes of grumpiness. You got high expectations of other people or behaviors or places or situations. It's supposed to be doing a certain way. They're supposed to be doing a certain thing a certain way and they're not. You're grumpy about it. You've got negative self-talk going on. Maybe you're beating yourself up over a mistake in what you perceive to be a mistake. And because you're so disappointed in yourself and you're having such a bad conversation with yourself about it, other people now irritate you. They didn't do anything to you. but they irritate you, right? Or you have unmet psychological needs. You lack the ability sometimes to maybe assertively communicate to somebody what you need, or you don't even know what you're feeling yet because you haven't done the work yet to really identify what the feelings are going on within you. Everything I'm talking about is really about heightening your consciousness to your emotions and to your feelings so that you can enhance the relationships in your life with others and with yourself. So now that I've talked about the identification, the causes, different symptoms of grumpiness, what a mood is, a prolonged emotion, negative emotional, I'll say negative because we're talking about grumpiness, but a prolonged negative emotional state that can persist for minutes, hours, days. God help you if you're being in a, lifetime of grumpiness. If you've watched the movie A Man Called Otto with Tom Hanks, fantastic example of a grumpy person. All right, so now that I've talked about all of that, how do we quickly reverse grumpiness when it's in its infancy so that it doesn't grow into something more? How do we quickly reverse grumpiness in the infancy so it doesn't stay there for days or years, or we don't become like a man like Otto? There's two ways, two different styles that I'm going to share with you when I come back from break. You've got one that's more of a thought action, and then there's tangible action that you can take. And so when I return from break, I'm going to go over those. I will in detail. I'll go over that thought action and the quote unquote do action. And then the do action piece of it, I'm going to walk you through how I got through my moment of de-grumpifying, as trademarked from my husband, to de-grumpify. And I'll go through my actual life example and walk you all the way through what I did for that solution to nip it before we had a reckless evening. So I contained the crazy. All right, we will be back shortly. If you want to reach out to me, you can do that through my website at susandenee.com or check out any of my social media. Feel free to message me. All right, be back shortly. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Know You're Crazy talk show. My name is Susan Denee, and you are listening to Emotional Recovery in the Raw. Today's topic, grumpiness. How do we de-grumpify? For all you grumpy pants out there, how do we de-grumpify in the moment? Whole first part, 45 minutes of the show, talking about identifying it, what are the causes of it? Kind of get into the behind the scenes of grumpiness. It's a mood, it's a prolonged state. Now I'm going to talk about, for the last segment of the show, I'm going to be sharing with you the thought action behind nipping grumpiness in its infancy before it does go to minutes, hours, days, months, or even years. Get it while it's early. So we're going to talk about some thought action, 4 different techniques in thought action. Then I'm going to give you 3 tangible, moving action items. And then I'm going to wrap up the show. Thought actions. Here we go for the thought actions. What are some thought actions you can take when you have already identified that this is grumpiness settling in? Number 1, just ask yourself, how do I feel? If your answer comes back, I feel irritated, frustrated, or overwhelmed, likely you are beginning to be grumpy. If a noise irritates the hell out of you in a moment, you are likely getting grumpy. If somebody looks at you and you think, are they starting something with me? You might be a little edgy. You might be grumpy. All right, so number 1, just ask yourself, how do I feel? And if the words come back, anything about that irritation or frustration, likely you're feeling grumpy. Number 2, ask yourself, is anybody doing anything to me? Like literally, is there a valid, is there a story going on right now? Or is life just lifey and I don't like it? Is the world just moving along at the world's pace and I'm just having a temper tantrum over it? I don't like it. Somebody turned left and I wanted him to go right. The wrong TV show popped up on the TV. I wanted something different. I mean, is that what's going on? Or did somebody actually do something to me? Usually it's just life being lifey. Number 3, ask yourself, am I about to take this mood out on my kids, my spouse, my coworkers, or maybe even myself with negative self-talk? Am I about to take my mood out on other people, including myself? Is that about what's going to occur right now with this feeling that I've got of irritation? I've got this feeling of irritation, and now what do you want to do with it? What are you prone? What are you used to doing with it? We all got self-identifiers. I think I'm going to do a show on that. I was talking to someone recently, and we were talking about her self-identifiers. I just started working with her. And when I was listening to her, I just couldn't help but notice all the self-identifiers that she was throwing out there. And because sometimes when we're on our own for so long and we're using our own mind to solve our own emotional needs, and I'll even say our own emotional, psychological needs. And sometimes it's like folks in recovery, we get really good at self-analyzation, too good, and then it's bad. Then it's bad because we're not right. We don't have any perspective. It's all about our self-centeredness when we take it too far. But we will create self-identifiers, right? And so sometimes you just got to ask yourself, if this is how I feel, if this is my frustration that's going on, you don't have to actually attach to it all the time and start labeling yourself. But likely you do have some of those. And so just ask yourself, what do you do with your grumpiness? What are you used to doing with your grumpiness? The reason I talk about the self-identifiers is, guess what? They're self-identifiers. What does that mean? You can change them because you're the one identifying yourself as them. So sometimes if I'm working with somebody or coaching somebody and I'm hearing them, I'll tell them to throw that out the window. Like, let's work on some new words. And what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? So watch out for the self-identifiers. And number four, a thought action is, so number one was just ask yourself, how do I feel? See if you're grumpy. Are you frustrated, irritated, overwhelmed? Number two, ask yourself, is anybody doing anything to me? Or is life just being lifey? That way we can dismiss some drama, right? Like, it's just, okay, it's all right. It's nothing bad, just grumpy. And number three, am I about to take this out on my family, my kids, my coworkers? Is that what this feeling's doing to me? What is my normal course of habitual negative action when I feel like this? Like, walk that all the way through. And then number four on the thought action is, say to yourself, I think I need to de-grumpify, or even better, I'm going to de-grumpify. I'm going to take ownership of my grumpiness and I'm going to de-grumpify. So those are the thought actions involved when the frustration and the feeling starts to set in, and we all identify with the feeling. We all know we've been grumpy. Everyone gets grumpy every now and then. Now, what are the do actions? What are the do actions? So this is what happened that day after I made a decision to de-grumpify. My plan was I was going to walk away and go do some praying. Go turn it over to my higher power. I had a lot of big stuff happen that day, pulling on the emotional heartstrings with my elderly mother, children that are on their own journey. I can have some influence maybe, but to sink my heart into that at this point, the older they get, it's kind of silly. So my job is to show up loving and supportive. And when I'm out of that, when I got fear creeping in, that can be challenging. So for me, my go-to after I've identified and done all those things, I think I'm going to take a step away and go talk to my higher power. That's kind of where I'll go. But then I say to my husband, you know what, instead, I think I'll call so-and-so, which is a mentor of mine. And so this is kind of going to get me into the first do action. Have your team of supporters who know how your crazy operates a phone number away. You can text message them if you'd like, but to me, text messaging in this type of circumstances, what are you going to do? Pick up the phone, call somebody, talk to them. So that would be my first do action. Have your team of supporters around who understand how your crazy operates and who you can be emotionally raw with and honest, and also know that they have your best interest at heart, and their feedback is going to be probably moment changing, life changing, emotionally changing for you. So have that team ready. And if you don't have that team yet, and I'm not talking about people who are going to co-sign off on your emotional BS and support what you're feeling. And, really, those are good friends. Those friends are always good to have. I'm talking about a mentor, somebody who can really help you pivot emotionally. So call someone to admit you're feeling grumpy. Talk through what preceded the mood you found yourself in, what happened. Tell them you need some help in redirecting your mood because you don't want to hurt anyone emotionally, especially yourself. So call somebody and talk about it. That's one of the do actions. And that's what I did. Instead of going to my normal course of action, which would be to go pray, I called my mentor. The other thing you can do is do some writing or take a walk to change the mood or the energy. Getting outdoors is a fantastic way to shift the energy. It's a fantastic way to shift the energy, to get out, look up, look around, see the sky, see the trees, kind of get you grounded, take your shoes off, do some grounding in some grass, feel the earth's energy. Fantastic things to do, or do some writing. I type fast. And so sometimes like in the mornings, if I'm doing like a download or a brain dump, I've talked about shows on that. If you're able, if you want to go do some writing about it, just get it out, just get the frustration out, change up the environment. That's what I'm talking about. Change up the environment. Tony Robbins would say, change your state. That's kind of in the same ballpark of that. And then last, for me, it was the first thing I said was I was going to go connect spiritually with my higher power. I understand if some of you don't believe in a higher power. I've said this many times on the show. I personally don't really get into religion. I don't prescribe to religion necessarily, but I do prescribe to spirituality. This is just my belief system. I believe we're all on the right journey when we believe in a higher power. I don't care if it's church. I don't care if it's religion. I don't care what it is. I believe that we're all on the same page when we're understanding. And here's the key word here, that I'm not in control. When I called that mentor, she laughed. First, she said, I said, I'm calling you to de-grumpify, because my husband had just given me a great word to use. And she loved it. And she starts laughing. And she says, of course you are. Because she knows me. She knows my bulldozer. She knows when I get cranky. She knows how I am. And she says, this is a great conversation for us to have today, Susan. And the reason that it was a great conversation for us to have is because I want to remind you of something. You're not in control. God is. You're not in control. There is no way I can orchestrate the chess pieces in my life to include everybody else's actions, moods, and behaviors. I can't control that whole chessboard. I'm only in control of my piece. And the rest is going to be up to the universe. And what I had failed to remember in that moment was, as much as I could pray, as much as I could identify, as much as I could do all that, I had to make a decision to turn it over and let the universe take it. And as soon as I did that, the mood, the grumpiness completely dissipated. And all of that, believe it or not, happened in about 5 minutes. So if you're grumpy tonight, there's some action steps for you. If you'd like some coaching, feel free to reach out to me at susandenee.com or any of my social media. And it has been a pleasure once again, one full hour of talking with you. And next week, I've got a guest, Todd Bryson, a best-selling author. So if you are a writer or somebody who's inspiring to write, this is the guy you want to listen to. He's on next Tuesday. All right, you guys have a great night. It's been awesome. Bye. You have been listening to Know You're Crazy.
Crazy.
And my name is Susan Denee. We are identifying, understanding, and treating your crazy one episode at a time. Tune in to transformationtalkradio.com. To connect with me or Growth Spurt Your Life, please visit susandenee.com. That's Susan Denee, DENEE.com.